Hey there, this is Cole. As you're listening to this, you have until August 1st to submit your responses if you have any thoughts about, well, anything Souls related, any prompts, any kind of like wrap-up thoughts, etc., comments about the show for the final Bonfireside Chat After Dark. That deadline again is August the 1st. Go over to Duckfeed.tv/contact and use the Bonfireside Chat button, and those will go to the right places. Thank you so much to everybody who has sent stuff in. The Patreon backers will still get priority, but we are looking for everybody else's responses to kind of fill it out and make that final After Dark just a straight-up party. Once again, that is Duckfeed.tv/contact by August 1st. Thank you.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And I'm Mitch Benes.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat After Dark, where we are reading your prompts and questions about the Souls series of video games.
Yeah.
And you heard we are rejoined by Mitch.
Thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you for all that support.
You're welcome. Thank
And
you for
also
the hours and hours of content.
Let's all thank the person to our left, and then thank the person to your left. Thank the person to your right. By the end of this semester, one of them will be dead.
I was going to go more in the direction of thank you, bonsai tree and roll of gaffer's tape.
Thank you, impending existential crisis.
And thank you, darkness. I've got a stack of Amazon boxes.
Ooh.
And then a bag of cherries next to me. It's cherry season, boys. And we have cherry picked some responses that people have sent in. That's not true. We're just doing all of them from the patrons of that level.
Fresh to you.
Yes, fresh to you, delicious, and these will not be the pits. I will get started here with Frederick Knight of Astoria, who says via Patreon. Back where it all started. 5 hours of excruciating pain and frustration, Red Knight anyone, and then 5 additional hours of trying to achieve equilibrium while constantly falling forwards. After that, I was baptized in flame as a masochist and Souls ambassador. How long did it take for you to break through the pain barrier? Was it a personal runaway or a sleeper hit? Yeah, do you want to... Mitch, you talked about this a little bit at the very beginning of the last episode. Kind of your experience getting into this, but how long did that process take of kind of getting over that specific difficulty hump, or that feeling of this being too hostile for words?
Well, the thing about it is, going back to sort of the world design and the level design, especially if you don't have a Souls literacy already built in, it's very difficult. Because the enemies themselves aren't very difficult by themselves, but the way that they're posted up specifically is meant to challenge you in different ways, depending on the layout that you're experiencing. So the long answer is that. The shorter answer is I never really... The pain barrier stopped the second playthrough. The first playthrough, when everything's new, it was still there. And, you talked about the long elevator in one of your bummers. Well, I experienced that 10, 15 times because I kept losing to that boss. And going back to the Souls economy, he kept taking away soul levels that I had to get back.
Yeah, that's a good thing that they stopped doing that.
What the fuck, Gallant?
If that had happened to me, that definitely would have been a bummer for me. It's just that I've never been soul drained by him. I don't say that as a brag. I came here after playing Dark Souls 1, so like it was easy for me to dodge that grab because it's the same timing as Gwyn's grab, more or less. Mm-hmm. So I'd already learned it.
Yeah.
Oh, that would make that way worse. Level drain, and then that became a hacking thing in Dark Souls 1, and oh boy, there's a storied history that has been largely patched out of our lives.
Yeah.
in an Eternal Sunshine-esque manner.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So I mean, I came to Demon Souls after dark, so it's hard for me to say like when I broke the pain barrier in Demons. I would say in Dark Souls it was definitely sometime in the Undead Parish. Like that, that was the point where it happened for me, and where I got the where my thirst was not slaked but stoked. Stoked is the opposite of slaked. Yes.
Yeah, pretty similar for me. Like beating, so it was Dark Souls 1 for me, and probably beating Taurus Demon was like the big kind of moment of just like, oh, like now I have to see what's next, and this feels doable.
Yep.
Because that took me a bunch of tries and did not feel doable.
Not to get off on too much of a tangent, like that really highlights a big difference between Dark Souls and Demon Souls in my mind, because if you think about the way that the worlds are set up, like 4-1's really difficult. The going to that even after you beat 2-3, you're still gonna have a tough time with 4-1 and 4-2 because every challenge is different. Like they offer so many different challenges, and I mean 3-1. That's way different than 4-1 and 4-2.
Yeah, there's not that kind of continuity. It's not so much an arc of difficulty. Yeah. It is that each kind of thesis that they put forward. I remember going to something, I just kind of hopping around at some point and talking to my friend Levi, who has been on the show in the first season, and who's the person who got me in, one of the people who got me into Dark Souls along with Kole, and him saying like you should go to 2-1 because there'll be some more kind of hollow-like enemies there. I was just like, why am I going from 1-1, which is full of hollows, and going to 4-1, which is full of bone wheels and bone wheel archers? Like just what the fuck? Like where are there? Why
microscopes?
Like a dentist for your hair, like or a lawyer for your hair. Why weren't there more just like zombies to fight? Yeah, and kind of having that experience. So this is one of the harder games to get into that thing. But I didn't have that. I know that if I'd played this the first time, I probably would have spent a long time in that Red Knight, just because I'm ornery that way. And this game actually rewards it. Like, that's some like a stupid thing I do. Like, I play Fallout 4 and there's a legendary Deathclaw, and it's like, well, if I use every mine in my inventory and run this guy around for about an hour, I can kill him, and it's going to be 20 tries, and all I'm going to get is random levelized loot because it's not, because it's a Bethesda game.
Right.
This will be worth it.
Yeah, it never is. And this would actually, be worth it. I know if I come here first, I would do that. I can't resist, fighting something before I should be able to fight it.
Right.
But I just didn't have that with this because I played Dark Souls 1 first. So I was just able to be like, I could fight this now, but like, I guess I could have done it when I came in Demon Souls, but if it had been new to me, I probably would have, I didn't come to it second and do it that way. So yeah, kind of got really incoherent there at the end.
No, it's fine. We've been recording for a while.
I apologize for that.
It was like a Bloodborne thing. I caught the symbolism of what we were.
Just as long as you get the thrust of what I mean, without looking
I started
too,
the question at the end. I didn't even know why I was doing it.
By the time I get to the end of this question, I'll not even know why I was there. Cool. What does the Liquid Swordsman say?
The Liquid Swordsman says via Patreon, Demon Souls is probably the most personally important game that I've ever played. After hearing so much about it, I imported the Taiwanese version as it had English text and audio. Demon Souls was the first animation priority game that I ever played, so my Temple Knight and I spent about 6 hours in World 1-1. I eventually got good, as they say, and rolled through the game with heavy armor and a halberd. There has never been a weapon with as diverse of a moveset since the Demon Souls halberd. Demon Souls' beautiful approach to combat as an equation to be solved, the game as community approach necessary pre-wiki, and its incredible atmosphere, the game has effectively ruined almost all other action games for me, and I think I'm better for it.
Yeah, that halberd is really good. Something we didn't talk about that I think is worth kind of noting, and this is something like Dark Souls 3 actually does pretty well, is weird kind of classes off the get-go. Like the idea of the Temple Knight and the Royal as being kind of things that don't map on traditional D&D kind of class structures. And the whole series mostly does that, but Demon Souls and Dark Souls 3 are pretty good at it.
Very much so.
I think.
Well, in this run-through of Demon Souls that I did for the show was the first time that I've actually played a specific mage build. I've done Moonlight Swords builds before, but that's usually strength first.
Yeah.
But this is the first one I rolled a royal and just tried that out.
Yeah. Something we didn't say in the main episode that kind of relates to that is, man, oh man, is range combat just absolutely necessary in this game compared to the other ones, which I feel like, I never think to go to range, be it bow and arrow or spells in the later entries in the series as much as I do in Demon Souls.
Yeah, but part of that is what Mitch was talking about in the last episode, like the encounters being designed a specific way.
Yeah.
And because you don't have the option to approach them from other angles a lot of the time. It's almost like, hey, I'm really supposed to have a bow here.
Yeah.
Like I can probably force my way through this, but part of it is a little bit of a lack of a toolbox. But the game makes it very easy to use a bow. Mm-hmm. And without too much investment, you can use the lava bow, which you can get very early, which is the best bow in the game, is tied for the best bow in the game.
Yeah.
So that it's pretty easy to have really effective range combat.
Yeah.
So the game is designed around it, but I think, probably on paper, it's not the best design, to not be able to make you approach all these situations regardless of your character build.
Right.
It's a bummer to come back with a bow and arrow.
Right.
And that's something that like other games in the series would do too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What does Alex have to say, Mitch?
Alex Gagne from Patreon says, I bought Demon Souls at launch after poring over excited GameFAQs posts from people that played the import version. Playing it was like being in a secret club. Even after all this time, the Souls games still make you feel like a kid swapping secrets on the playground. To me, that's the greatest feat of the series, evoking how it felt to play NES games, even with modern graphics in the internet age.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does that very well. I think we covered a lot of that in the main episode. I don't have a lot to add to that.
Yeah. All that I have is personal heartbreak that I wasn't one of those people who was part of the, hey, I imported this, and I had like probably 100 people max that I could talk about this with.
Yeah. A lot of times, like game reviewers get that too. That's something that Jason Killingsworth talked about when he first played this, where it's just like everybody who just had early release was kind of the same kind of experience. Yeah. He started that email thread. So yeah, that is a really kind of valuable thing. It's hard to think of another game that has done that,
especially in this current age.
It's like Frog Fractions, right? Like that kind of design. That's kind of what he's going for. What Jim's going for. Mm-hmm. And it works differently than that. Or like you run into, like you see the ARGs that like Edmund McMillan does.
Right.
For Isaac, things like that. That's about as close as you get. And that even feels a little bit different. There is something where like information is just so free now that,
No.
Yeah. It's hard to get around. Which is okay, but it does, we have lost something. And I think it's interesting to look back on games or artifacts before that was lost. Yeah. So thanks, guys. Jacob says via Patreon, I find the way I think about Dark Souls 2, and this is on to general Souls things. I find the way I think about Dark Souls 2 has changed quite a bit in the last year that we've had Dark Souls 3 to play around with. For most of that time, I really thought that 2 was more of a guidance story, just focusing on one interesting cycle, but not actually all that important to the larger cosmology, while 3 was bringing us back to the core of the story as we understood it in Dark Souls 1. More recently, I found the opposite to be true. 3 is the entry in the series that relies heavily on cheap references and superficial similarities, while 2 takes the general themes in play and fleshes them out, mapping them onto relatable human characters while simultaneously expanding the idea of the cycle of decay and renewal. It's funny to me now that I see Dark Souls 2 as pretty much the emotional heart of the series, and a much better story when so many rushed to declare it non-canon when Dark Souls 3 was released. This is all I ask. Do you think your perception of Dark Souls 2 and its place, and the place it occupies in the larger series, has changed significantly because of what Dark Souls 2 turned out to be?
I mean, I'll rush in with probably the easiest answer. For as much as I love Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3 hammered home. Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne hammered home the fact that From operates best when they're not making a sequel. like if Dark Souls 2 was just Cursed Souls or whatever and only bore a Demon's Too Dark level of similarity, it would have been fine. So like I think Dark Souls 3 actually diminished Dark Souls 2 a little bit in my mind.
Yeah, it's not like necessarily by comparison. It does kind of show the reality of this. So like the famous Souls YouTuber Epic Name Bro, who is not, I like about half of his stuff quite a bit. some of the stuff I'm not as into. I think it's all good. Like, he's a good dude. But he did just a recent thing where he's like, here's why, responding to people who are like, why don't you like Dark Souls 2? And he more or less, he brought up Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 kind of in the same thing, and just said like, yeah, they're sequels, and they were never meant to be a sequel. Like, Dark Souls 1 was not meant to be a trilogy. And that comes through, to me, heaviest in terms of Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's where it is kind of the nastiest. In revisiting Dark Souls 2 for the show, it doesn't gain anything, or it doesn't gain as much from the Dark Souls name. It also doesn't try to, though.
Right.
It doesn't rely on it so much. It never rounds up using Dark Souls things,
right.
Other than literally just like Children of Manus, and it could have been a Demons to Dark thing. So it ends up actually being better, but it makes me wish more that it had been like Curse Souls, like you said.
Yeah.
Like, it still holds up pretty high in esteem for me, but I wish it was. And the same thing goes for Dark Souls 3. Like, if you stripped out all the Dark Souls 1 references from Dark Souls 3, you'd have a svelte 4-hour game that didn't that you'd be able to like shoot through in an afternoon. Just like a day rental, like just grab it from the red box.
Yeah.
But if you would develop the things that were not Dark Souls 1 sequel, bait from Dark Souls 3, I'd much rather have that be like a different Souls game too. Like the continuing, as much as we were pretty down on Dark Souls 3 during that season, like the things that were new, like I'm the biggest Aldrich fan that there is. Like the new kinds of threats that they introduce were so cool.
Yep.
To me, it just fell down because of how kind of schizophrenic it was, and like, oh, here are 5 factions that have connections to Logan, because remember Logan was cool. It was it doesn't tell its story well. And if it had just been like, I don't know what, the second one was Curse Souls, and the third one was, I don't know,
Deep Souls.
Deep Souls. That would have been awesome. Like, I would have really, really liked the game. So I think that both those games don't benefit from being sequels, really, but Dark Souls 3 has way more of its kind of body being tied up in being a sequel, if that makes sense. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. Like, it does make me think of Dark Souls 2 differently, but it doesn't make it change in quality to me.
Yeah. Maybe I was harsher. I was inelegant in the way that I said it. I still love Dark Souls 2. It just it has changed it for me.
Well, it kind of shows you like, oh, this isn't a blip. Like, this is what sequels are to Dark Souls.
Right.
It's not just like Dark Souls 2. Like, it's like, hey, this is kind of how they do these. So what do you think, Mitch?
It's kind of hard for me because Dark Souls 3 I really actually loved. And I went back to Dark Souls 2 afterwards, and it's funny sort of comparing the two, because Dark Souls 2, you guys always talk about how Souls finds your weakness. Dark Souls 2, I can't even beat the Pursuer by myself. Like that first boss, but yet I'm beating, Slave Knight Gale by myself easily. I'm beating the Storm King easily. It's like I can ace Dark Souls 3, but then I go back to Dark Souls 2 and it's not. It's way harder for me almost.
Do you mean the Nameless King easily?
Yeah, it starts with the Storm King and then the Nameless King, right? Like
is he called the Storm? Because it's I think you're right.
Sorry, that's kind of what I meant. I meant the dragon part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
The Nameless King still eats my lunch. But I think what I'm trying to get to is the sort of importance on different mechanics between Dark Souls 3 and 2, whereas Dark Souls 3 sort of hits you in the face with everything that it has to offer, and Dark Souls 2 sort of invites you to look at it more. It doesn't change what I think about Dark Souls 2 on the whole, but it sort of separates out those two in my mind. Like Dark Souls 1 and 3 feels the same, and Dark Souls 2 feels different. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
maybe,
I'm definitely looking at it like I'm definitely looking at it more holistically. Like the revisit has definitely made some things with Dark Souls 2 that like, we talked about it a lot. Like it's hard to go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Like the action is not as smooth.
Right.
And that's true. And it does change the feel of it. So I can see it kind of changing those weaknesses. For me, the kind of holistically, I would have really appreciated it as this kind of like offshoot. And then same thing with Dark Souls 3, but when I talk about that, I'm not necessarily talking about mechanically. I think that Dark Souls 3 has more mechanical problems than it generally gets, than get talked about. But I also think that its biggest problems are kind of narrative and flavor wise. Mm-hmm. So mechanically, I can definitely see your point.
Yeah,
like it does feel really good in your hands. Like it does play very well. It's very smooth.
Yeah, but ask me why a Fume Knight Ultra Greatsword is in Dark Souls 3. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no reason. Like there's no it is arbitrary and bad.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Like what are you gonna do? Cancel us? Like, I just
Jordan M writes via Patreon. After all of this time, given the ability to strike the series from your memory, which game of the series would you be most excited to approach with fresh eyes?
You'll probably Dark Souls 1.
Oh yeah,
still, because it's my first. It's very hard for me to do the the kind of Jim Carrey philosophical movie vehicle version where I lose that memory and stuff. Like I think we made a strong case for Demon Souls during this episode, but like I have no idea what that would be like fresh. Right. I know what Dark Souls fresh is like, and it was one of the most important art interactions I've had in my life. So
same. If there was a button in my house that I could press that made me feel the same way that I felt when I first found the elevator from the parish back to Firelink, I would press it I would never not press it. Actually,
they should bottle that,
right? Like I just to be able to go back and feel that fresh again, that would be a wonderful gift. Yeah, Dark Souls 1 without a doubt for me.
I would actually go with Bloodborne. I think a lot of Bloodborne suffers in its comparison to the Dark Souls series. A lot of the bosses suck because you've seen every single one of those bosses done better in a different game. Whereas if I went to Bloodborne and approached it on its own merits without sort of things that came before it, I'd be like, well, I don't really like this one as much. And a lot of these bosses get samey, but boy, everything else is really cool. And I wouldn't be bothered by the fact that there isn't a ranged mechanic,
Yeah.
That's actually a good point, because like Bloodborne, we talked about this in the Bloodborne episode, but I think a lot of any of Bloodborne's failings that it has is because it's a Souls game, where it's having a foot in both ponds, and like going to it without that, it'd be like, it's kind of weird that, there's so many, this kind of abandons the kind of regain flow of the early game, but it wouldn't feel quite as like, it wouldn't feel like it was betraying. I wouldn't be like, or I wouldn't be like, why isn't this just Estus? Yeah. Like I wouldn't have a better example of everything that I had problems with. Why isn't this just the Tower Knight? It would be, that's a pretty good answer. I didn't think about it in terms of like revisiting one of the games after forgetting all the other ones.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 3 would be weird. All the references without the
we talked to a bunch of people. Like we always said, like, when during the season we were like, what would it be like to play this first? And for the most part, people who did, I think, just weren't that invested in, weren't invested in the lore stuff. Not everybody. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but a lot of people were just kind of like, I just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Very much. I just, here's a weird name of something, and that's it. So, but it would seem like a lot of references to nothing. Yeah, for sure. What does Josh have to say, Mitch?
Josh Grimer, I think. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Via Patreon says, "What's the worst you've been tricked by a soapstone message? My first time through Dark Souls 1, I was very curious about everything. After all, this is the game that will fuck you after all. I read every message and took most of them pretty seriously. I read a message in Darkroot Garden that said something to the effect of mimic ahead. This was near the bonfire behind the illusory wall. I thought, well, I know Dark Souls has mimics. What an amazing subversion to have mimic bonfires. I skipped that bonfire. For the next few hours, I approached every subsequent bonfire like it would be a possible landmine. Sweating, heart pounding. I need to check this checkpoint. I hope I don't die. You can imagine my surprise when I got to Sin's Fortress."
No.
That's pretty good.
Oh, man.
I've got a ready answer. for that.
Please.
Which happened also in Darkroot, where somebody had put, just take one step, or whatever the nomenclature is in Dark Souls 1. I did it the first time because it was the first time it occurred to me that those could lie, and fell to my death. And then didn't go back there, didn't trust it, viewed every soapstone message as being wary of them. And then that actual space, if you jump off of that, it's actually that shortcut down to where the wolf ring is. So it's like, or not down to that second area, like you can make that fall.
Right.
If I had the cat ring, or you get a cat ring, you can make that fall. It's either a stat thing or an equip burden thing.
You have like a feather fall spell you can get.
Yeah. There's ways to do it. I could have made that jump, but I just didn't trust it, and didn't end up getting to that second area for most of my playthrough. Until the end, where I got to my traditional Souls-like thing, where it's like, okay, I feel ready to beat this. Let's go online and see what I missed.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know that I have a story that's as specific as that. But even though I know a lot of these games like the back of my hand, if I see a soapstone message up against a wall and it says try attacking, or fake wall, blah blah blah, whatever version of that is, guess what I do? Like a dipshit, I attack it, thinking, hey, maybe there's one I missed. So, and people just love putting those around. Just like, yes, I'll put it here because it looks like a place where a fake wall would be. So I fall for it. I am credulous to a fault.
Yeah, you don't lose anything by doing that. So I do it. I do the same thing.
The falls haven't really got me. The ones that got me were in Dark Souls 2, where it would be in front of a chest and says mimic ahead. Mm-hmm. And you attack the chest and you hit it twice just because you have, twitchy fingers. And then all of a sudden you lose the chest. It's like, rub it. Mm-hmm. So those are the times that I've been tricked by soapstone messages, because, mimics absolutely kill you in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can definitely kind of do that reverse trickery with them. So that's some next level trolling. I wish I had gone back. I'd have to go back in time and do it, but I wish I had jotted down all of my favorite soapstone messages, because that'd be a fun thing to revisit. Mm-hmm. And there have been so many really good ones.
Yeah.
Like ones that, initially don't seem like they make sense, and then you find out something that does make sense with them. I always really appreciate.
My favorite will still always be in front of a gigantic door in High Wall of Lothric, a message that says secret door.
Yeah. Those are really great. I remember another one where I got tricked. Somebody put in front of the Rat King in the Grave of Saints, put miscreant ahead, or liar ahead or something.
Okay.
And I attacked that guy on my first playthrough. I was like, oh, he's the same guy who I've been fighting. Like, he's gonna come up and bite me in the back, or it's gonna be some kind of patches shit. And killed him before I should have. And then didn't engage with those guys until my second playthrough.
And then you proved him right about humans.
I did prove him right about humans. It's sad. Yeah. I like that character. I think that in the last episode we bookmarked talking about the Grave of Saints, and then just never did.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, we'll get back to that later, and it just didn't happen. Yeah, but that idea didn't totally work, but it was a really cool idea to be able to set up your own little fun house of traps and shit. I would like to see that executed on well. For sure.
Same.
Tom B says via Patreon, I still remember the first time I played Dark Souls on the PC and had proper draw distance and resolution. I stood at Firelink and realized I genuinely could see all the way down into Blighttown and all the way up to the outer wall of Anor Londo. Open world games always used to give us that old cliche of, see that mountain? You can go there. For Dark Souls, the awe I felt was less about seeing where I could go and more about understanding where I'd been. With that in mind, what is your favorite view in the whole series and why? That is a cool question.
Yeah. I'm going to give the easy and obvious answer, and I'm just going to take initiative so I don't have to think of another one. Irithyll.
Mm-hmm.
It is still the most breathtaking thing.
Yeah, Irithyll looks really great. That is a visual triumph for sure.
To do a non-obvious one, one of my favorite areas still aesthetically is Ash Lake. I think that it is so alien, it is so otherworldly. And the fact that you were looking out and seeing these trees that go up to other worlds is always going to speak to me. So yeah, Ash Lake.
And you can see that from part of the Tomb of the Giants. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool connection thing. If you leave your souls down there, they Or you can see I think that there's some kind of area you can see from, like there's an illusory wall post about how far you can see your souls.
Yeah.
And those two areas actually do like coexist. And it's really, really neat.
It's pretty great. How about you guys?
That is a tough one. I think like I don't have a good answer for that, but I want like to expand like a little bit on what Tom was saying, is that like I think that the reason why in Dark Souls it is more meaningful than the classic Bethesda or BioWare, see those mountains, you can go there, sense is that the space in between will be meaningful and difficult and hard won.
Yeah.
Like as much as I've had fun playing Skyrim or what have you, or any of those games, like getting there is not that interesting.
It's just a function of time.
It's literally just a time tax. Like I can, right from the beginning of Skyrim, I can turn in a random direction, see a mountain, get there. But the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to have to run away from some wolves and maybe kind of exploit some geometry to climb up a mountain. It won't be meaningful. Whereas in Dark Souls, like looking up to Anor Londo, I know like that's going to be a significant, like there's my next 10 hours, that's going to be a significant amount of like hardship and kind of value between me and there. And then when you get back, it's like instead of looking back, I'm just thinking of it in terms of distance, which is what most open world games do. I'm looking back at it in terms of like depth of experience.
Yeah.
Which I think is more powerful.
I think I would have to say probably the Ring City skybox. I know that wasn't anybody's favorite DLC, but just seeing the world collapsing in on itself.
Yeah.
It feels like this really interesting meta narrative about how the world of Dark Souls is just kind of collapsing in on itself. And then you see a seeping wound coming from the sky. It's just very evocative and very cool.
Yeah, I think that even in that episode, like it looks awesome.
Yeah.
Like the Ring City is very breathtaking as far as visually. For sure.
Yes. Let's see. Is this me?
I believe so.
Okay. Viginti writes via Patreon, the year is 2027. The last Metroid is in captivity. Miyazaki has touched this plane for the last time, ascending in a singularity event. From is disbanded, but Bandai Namco, Bando Namkai, as he says, retains the rights to Souls and announces that they are going to do a reboot of a classic IP. As the only surviving experts in the field, they come to you for advice. Who should be in charge of this project? Which game designer or studio, living or dead, as an AI replica can be arranged, would you recommend?
Boy, that's tricky.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, if living or dead, just like, okay, so let's like boot up a version, a backup of From circa 2009, 2010 and give it back to them. I don't know. But then you're just repeating the cycle. Shit.
Yeah, never. I mean that's probably still what I choose, because I like living or dead gives us a lot of a lot of leg room. But I wouldn't want to see like it's not like I want to have a WADA on it or something. Like I don't I can't think of anybody at that point. It would be people who exist now, and just forgiving for the fact that kind of taking into account that they might not be alive then.
Yeah.
So I would want like kind of golden age From, and I would want them to have not done any Souls like between now and then.
Right.
So that would be the tricky part. It was like 10 years of just like letting this idea and letting new ideas and new kind of approaches kind of bubble forth.
Yeah. Gary, I know you're probably going, this will make you rip your hair out, but I would love to see what the Chinese Room did with Souls.
Yeah, I would choose somebody. I want the same idea, but I want Fulbright to do it.
Yeah.
Like I think Chinese Room is bad, and I think Fulbright is good.
All right. But it's a similar idea expressed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would like that. It's hard though. Like a lot of game designers who I really love just have such different values. Like, this year with Prey is like really reinforcing me. Like, like Arcane is one of my favorite game studios. Like they haven't made a bad game to my mind. Like I love those guys, but I wouldn't want to see them do Souls. Like that's not really their strength. It's a different kind of depth of area, like a simulation kind of real feeling kind of immersive sim thing that they do is so different than the kind of evocative, more dreamlike suggested place kind of thing. So it's hard for me to think of another studio I'd want to put on it, that do that. But I think that like a non-combat exploration based, Souls, like what became of Gwen Finch or whatever, would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty interested to see someone like Kojima take a crack at it. I feel like if you go the wholly atmospheric
You're
route,
killing me, Mitch. Like, you're killing me.
After you said
You just made me
Kojima,
puke in my mouth.
I put in a bongo sound. That is the vein in Gary's forehead.
You're killing me, buddy. You're describing whatever, like if I signed up with the Take a Wish Foundation, like whatever the opposite of that is.
do you know why the Dark Soul exists? Because nuclear proliferation.
Yeah, the Dark Soul exists.
What?
Question.
Dark
The last
Soul?
3 words you said
Yeah.
with a question mark instead of. I'm playing Final Fantasy After Years, and it does that a lot too. Everyone's constantly going, "What? What?" Like no matter what happens, what? There's a weird vocal tick.
I feel like if you have Kojima and his over-talkiness and Dark Souls and its atmosphericness, they might meet in the middle of like a Goldilocks middle, and you can see what that would look like. I don't know. I'd like to see him take a crack at it.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I would. It would be the first time where the like, when people are just like, I don't care whether Kojima games are good. I just got to see what he does.
Yeah.
That would be the only time that worked for me, where I was just like, I got to see this. Regardless of how good it is, like I'm curious enough about this.
Yeah.
That would be the expression where that worked.
Sideshow appeal.
Yeah, it would definitely have kind of sideshow appeal. They are such opposite tacks to me. Like they almost couldn't be more different. There's like a degree of like care put in. Like there's definitely a amount of detail, but just like the difference between subtext and supertext,
Right.
is kind of the just what if everything in Dark Souls that was left for the player to figure out was instead dialogue between 2 people
Expounded upon.
Yeah, expounded
Patches
upon.
is your Patches is your guide.
Is he your handler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's your
I would-
Virgil.
Yeah, and then just it would be that would probably kill me in a real serious way. It would be interesting though, like if we were running VR experiments, like I could just like plug that into a simulation and see what it would be like, without it actually being like, oh, that means he owns the rights. Fuck, like this is where we're at now, whether we like it or
Going
not.
back to the Metal Gear Solid 2 episode, you think about Aldrich. That's a real Kojima boss right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you got like Liquid's arm on Ocelot. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's true. He just doesn't talk about it. That's really that's the difference. He doesn't talk. If Aldrich like delivered him like a 20-minute death monologue, no matter how much I like Aldrich, I don't think it'd make Aldrich better.
Yeah.
That would be the killer thing
Perhaps
for me. But I acquiesce that it would be interesting.
Perhaps you would have preferred a fantasy situation.
Yes, I would have. Perhaps it is a sort of role-playing game. It's difficult to think about. I would also like to see like it would be kind of. I think the Chinese room Fulbright thing is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Though, like that's something. Allison's always talking about that. Like she wants to make like essentially a Souls like with no combat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really
I saw. I mean, I've got to admit, I saw her and Riff talking about that idea. I was just like, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. I would like to see that.
Yeah. It'd be cool if it would happen. I just don't hope that it would.
Yeah.
But this is the magical land of wishes. So like,
Yeah.
whose is this? Is this yours, Mitch?
This is Mitch.
Jacob. Yeah, this is me. Jacob via Patreon says, if you guys had known better, is there anything you wouldn't have covered during an off season or anything you wish you had?
I can talk about that or you have an answer. You go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've got one. I would have just read Berserk and not talked about it for all the grief that it's caused us.
I'm so glad we did it. Like,
I'm happy we did as well. But if we're looking at it in terms of the amount of shit we've had to deal with off of the back of that,
it is dumb. Yeah. Like the amount that like something that like people still like those episodes and people talk about them, but people who don't like them are really vocal about it. And, in a way that just, I don't know, without wanting to get into it because it's frustrating.
Yep.
Like it's frustrating to deal with the fallout from, but it happens. Like, so that's definitely like a career mixed bag.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, we probably would have made them angry anyway. So
yeah, I mean, there's no winning.
Yeah.
Like there's literally no winning with anime fans. Like you cannot do it. With some, not all.
See, you're trying to win, Gary. You're trying to win.
I'm not trying to win. I'm just trying to like not have, like really, really long Twitter threads talking shit about us for no reason. So that's there's arguments to be had for that. I'm really glad I read it. Like, despite reports, like I really liked it. I just didn't like it in the right way. So I guess
well, no, the problem is that you liked it.
The problem is that it's more that I like that and I didn't like something else. So
right.
In addition to not liking the right Souls games in the right amounts, not liking the right animes in the right amount is also a problem.
Yeah.
For a certain class of fan.
And you should have known that before you open your goddamn mouth.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Apparently so. As far as things that I wish we like hadn't covered at all, it's kind of tricky to say, because they all like have a relation at least to a little bit. I kind of wish that things had worked out. I would have rather have done a much more cursory glance at Neo and covered the Surge, I think.
Yeah.
I haven't played the Surge, but like it looks more related, and I also got like just personally ended up having a pretty frustrating experience with Neo feedback as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that came in through the show, but like, as somebody who like when I play games, like I work out how I'm feeling about them on Twitter. Like that's what I do. I don't save it for the show. I want to have conversations and hear other people's thoughts. I microblog. It is a microblog. Not liking Neo caused a lot of annoying feedback. And it's like, at the end, it's like, I wish that it would just been kind of a footnote for us. Like we didn't go that in depth with it. Maya was great. Like I really appreciate, her input and everything and helping us out with that. But I just ended up being ultimately more frustrated than not. And I would have, even the follow up from the Lords of the Fallen guys sounded better to me.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. Is there anything you can think of that would have made sense for us to cover, Mitch? Or anything that we did cover and you're like, this fucking sucks? And as long as it's not the Berserk episodes, because I don't, for reasons, I don't want to hear that again.
Well, actually, no. I kind of feel like I would have liked to see, instead of something like Dark Mouse, where apparently nobody really cared about it. I mean, you played it, but nobody really wrote in about it or anything like that. Mm-hmm. There are a couple saggy games in that sort of interim season. I would have liked to see things like Armored Core 4, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it's Miyazaki made and it kind of has a couple of things. So like things that aren't directly inspired or directly preceding Dark Souls, but things that are almost like side things from Software. That's what I mean. From Software games that are not Dark Souls.
And we definitely toyed around with that. Like Dark Mouse is a good criticism, right? Like those episodes weren't great shakes and nobody cares about that game. Like it's definitely related. I think that's probably arguable that we shouldn't have done that. And then other, so Armored Core 4, we talked a little bit about Eternal Ring and Evergrace and things like that. Ninja Blade, Lost Kingdoms, like those other FromSoft games. It would just be it would mean we're prolonging the show at that point. And we were just kind of like, it's the off seasons are something that doesn't come through, is that like they're really fatiguing because it's essentially doubling our workload. Yeah, like we talk about it, but I don't know if everyone totally appreciates it. It's really fatiguing because we're essentially doubling our load from Watch Out for Fireballs.
Yeah.
And just kind of doing that. So like doing something like we talked about, throwing an Armored Core game in there, and it's like these, we look at how long this is to beat, like that is just signing us up for like a ridiculous week.
Yep.
And it just became a practical consideration. So we could have stretched it out and done a full season of, if something happened, like say like Bloodborne 2 or something got announced and it was fall before we kind of both got in our idea, in our heads to like expand Watch Out for Fireballs to cover everything and kind of have an Omni, Swiss Army game show. We might have stalled for time and done like a other FromSoft game thing. But the nice thing is that like, now that we are kind of widening the umbrella for Watch Out for Fireballs, is there's no reason why we couldn't do Armored Core 4 or Evergrace or Eternal Ring or Lost Kingdoms or Ninja Blade or any of those games, Metal Wolf Chaos. And like, we want to. Like a lot of the kind of From also runs, like we're fans of the studio in general. Like we are the people who have spent the most time talking about Shadow Tower, I feel like, on the internet, and I love that game. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
I want to talk about From's other stuff. We're just going to do it on a different show.
Yeah.
Let's space things out and not kind of do double duty at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's coming. Things like that will happen.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, like Dark Mouse is like, that's not the best episode of the show.
No.
that's not super great.
Well, and I think the problem is that you also did it on Check It Out Comrade as well.
Yeah,
so it was like a lot of things that you wanted to say about it, you had already said about it.
What I thought was going to happen was I was going to play it again because I played it for like the amount of time I spend on Check It Out Comrade, and I was like, oh, this is kind of neat, and thought I was going to kind of fall in love with it, and thought it was going to be longer and have a little bit more kind of depth to it than it ended up having, and not be so kind of hatefully difficult.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a gamble. Like, we planned it out in advance, and Cole had never played it, so I wanted to hear what he had to say, and it just kind of didn't work out. So it was a little bit of a gamut that didn't work out.
Well, also talking about those other off-season games like Salt and Sanctuary and games that you specifically, I think you ended up sort of on the middle, teetering on didn't like Salt and Sanctuary, but those games that you didn't like specifically, I know there is a lot of probably Twitter flack where they're like, well, why didn't you like this? Why are you doing it if you don't like it? I think there's value in that too. Like I like hearing about games that you guys don't like just as much as I like hearing about games that you do like. I think where Dark Mouse really falls in my mind is it's a game that I think pretty much the world is ambivalent on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more the issue.
Yeah, it's fallen below the radar. People are really sympathetic about our feelings on Salt and Sanctuary. I think the fact that we waited a year to cover it helped as well, because we were not right in the middle of, oh my god, this is the successor kind of hype post-release. And I mean, we had a very good interaction with the developers, one of the developers behind Salt and Sanctuary here recently, that I want to call out and say, like, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the people at that studio.
Totally. Yeah. Like I felt pretty bad, right? Like that person tweeted and they're like, hey, you guys covered it. This is harsh. And I was like, I'm torn because I don't feel like, it was never a lie. I wasn't playing up my feelings for that game for effect.
No.
But I understand that can be hard to hear. I think that we did say some positive things about that game, right? Like, if I wouldn't have felt like I would have got kicked out of a creative writing class for saying, for that feedback, right? Like it was reasonable, I think, but it was just very hard to be face to face with the person, who was responsible for it. And they were great.
Yes.
Like, it was just like, and it was the perfect way, it's just, I don't understand that we're not for everybody, or this thing isn't for everybody. And that was really it. And we just had a very pleasant interaction, and that was awesome.
Yes.
Because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, I understand people are behind these things. I also, again, though, I'm not, I feel like my job is to honestly say what I feel. And that's the entirety of my job.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Salt and Sanctuary, we did our jobs with it, and some people did feedback, because that is a very popular game. And I was able to tell the developer, people disagree with us about that all the time.
Oh yeah.
On the Slack, that's very frequent. That people are just you guys are wrong about Salt and Sanctuary. And it's that's fine too. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
That, that people don't agree with us about it. It's just, me getting out what I thought about it.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'll take us into the Just Funnin' section with Stuart McGowan. You'll remember him from the Bloodborne episode, saying via email, what other game series would you want to hear a Bonfireside Chat ask a deep dive on?
What do you think, Mitch?
Probably if I had to choose one, I would choose something like Final Fantasy. I know you guys have probably kicked it around, and it's probably not going to happen. But I think if you're talking about series that sort of have a baseline level of stuff to talk about, and interesting stuff to talk about, and sort of comparative stuff to talk about, I think Final Fantasy has a nice sort of arc to it. Other than that, there's not too many series that occupy space in my mind as to be interesting throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Final Fantasy one too, I guess in this episode, while we're airing dirty laundry on our path to the end, part of the reason why, I'm such a big fan of the WoF 2.0 model, where we can do Final Fantasy games and then take a break, is the idea of just signing myself up to play that many JRPGs in a row would be fatiguing and awful.
Yeah.
Even, our friends who do Mega 10 Marathon, which is a good podcast that does that for Shin Megami Tensei, that's more than I want to do.
Yeah.
I can't just, I want to play a variety of games. I can't just sit there and play that grindy of a genre just in perpetuity throughout the universe.
Ambiently in your life. Yeah.
But I would want to have some, like, the question is, what would we like to hear somebody else do on? And I'm with you. Like, a Final Fantasy show would be really cool.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. Like, I think the series does support it. I just don't have that big of an appetite for it. Mm-hmm. Another answer I would love to have somebody do a chronological exploration of games based on Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
That's a particular little thing of mine, but I love that shit. Mm-hmm. There's a really good YouTube video by a guy named 90s Gamer 92, which I still think is a very funny handle. He's retired now, but he did really good videos, and he has a feature length, it's 2 hours long history of video games based on Dungeons and Dragons. It's not totally comprehensive. He skips kind of large swaths, but the early history is really good.
Yeah.
But I would love to have deep dives on those things. Because there's a lot of goodness there, and there's a lot of B- good stuff too. Mm-hmm. I want somebody to talk about Dragonstone, or the Dritzt, beat 'em ups.
Yeah.
Things like that, which I think are those are good games, good interesting games, without being necessarily something I want to play through at the drop of a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. My answer would be for somebody to go through and dig up the good stuff in the Elder Scrolls. Talk about it topic by topic, just because I know how expansive those are. I realize there's not an awful lot to talk about in those from a play standpoint. Just because the encounter, just the way that game articulates is not as mechanically intricate as something else. But I would like to hear some of the weird stuff, because that is what I like about those in a lot of regards.
Yeah, there is a lore cast. When we did Morrowind, I found it but never listened to it. I just knew that it exists. So I think it's kind of neat.
I'll have to seek
Fallout
it out.
would be pretty good along those same lines too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a really good YouTube channel that does that called Shoddycast. That does a couple of different games, but they mostly do Fallout, and they're kind of from the perspective of this they're pretty slick. They've got a good voice actor he has this character called the Storyteller, who just kind of goes subject by subject through Fallout. So it's here's 11 minutes on the Enclave, here's 11 minutes on the Brotherhood of Steel.
Does he do it in the voice of Three Dog?
It's the
Let me tell you a story.
It's more just deep guy trailer voice.
Okay.
A little bit. I wish it was Three Dog. I wish it was Nervous DJ from Fallout 4 before you give him confidence. I wish it was Travis. We're gonna die. But it's pretty good. So if anybody's looking for a Fallout version of Bonfireside Chat, there's 60 or 70 episodes of that, and I've watched most of them, and they are good.
Yeah. What I don't want anybody to misunderstand is we are not saying we're doing any of this. We're so very tired.
Yeah.
They're doing all of it 2018.
Yeah, 2018. Yeah. Give us a svelte 5 months to prepare. And no, it would be these are things I would love to see.
Yeah.
For sure. But for now, we are not what a dick move it'd be to rearrange our Patreon again for this. Just 17 days on the new model. Then I think we should be able to be sued. I think that would be would officially be a scam if we did that.
The government would go to Patreon HQ and pull out a big plug that just has our logo on it.
Yeah.
It's got your logo duct tape on it. On Fireside Chat.
Oh man. I think this next one has some praise. So Gary, if you want to take that,
I will read Tim's. Tim says via Patreon, I mostly just wanted to thank you guys for starting this awesome podcast, which provided a door into the amazing Duckfeed community. When I became completely and utterly obsessed with this series after buying the first game on a whim 3 or so years ago and decided to Google Dark Souls podcast, I didn't expect to get something as wonderful as Bonfireside Chat and the rest of the network. I've met and gotten to know some really terrific people, and playing games alongside the show has really enriched the experience in so many ways. It may sound cliche, but all of it helped me through a rough time in my life dealing with the loss of someone close to me. So once again, thank you, and I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with next. It's a speedy 5 months on Final Fantasy IV, my friend. 5 weeks, not months. It's the five short weeks.
Yep.
Final Fantasy 2018.
Yes, the entirety.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, people are. It's funny how like the Slack has become like, just like part of my daily checks.
Mm-hmm.
Like there not a day goes by that I don't like talk about it or talk on it.
Yep.
And chat with people, and it just becomes a thing where it's like, I get up, I check Twitter and Facebook and my email, and pop onto Slack and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is a really good community.
Yeah.
I know we talk about that a lot, but it is definitely true.
Yeah, it is one of the biggest shifts we've made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think this is safe for you to read, Mitch. Sam's
safe for me. Good. Sam Bear via Patreon. Besides the obvious answer of DS Fix, what are your favorite Dark Souls mods? I'm mostly thinking about dumb joke ones, but if there are any serious ones, that'd be cool too. My favorite mods are the ones that put giant pot leaves and pictures of Cheech and Chong on the grass crest shield for the sheer crassness of it. And the one that recolors the giant crow into a giant seagull.
I didn't know about that.
You can make it Velka's like cousin Melka. Who's obsessed with seagulls.
Crispy, tasty, salty.
The estranged cousin.
Yeah, cousin of the gods.
We don't talk about Melka.
The DLC they'll never release. I've got answers for this if nobody else does.
Of course.
Because I did a bunch of Dark Souls 1 modding back when I was obsessed. So like the one that added the most kind of coolness to the game, like the Perma Gravelord one is cool.
Yeah.
But the highly aggressive enemies one changes every encounter in the game. Mm-hmm. Basically by changing enemies' aggro radiuses. So you're going to run into them in areas you don't expect.
Yeah. And
was like a total remix of the game. Like I did both of them, but out of the ones that made a difference, like the Black Phantoms, you can go through large stretches of level without running into a Black Phantom. Mm-hmm. But the aggro mod is awesome. And I just read just today about somebody finally modding in a boss rush.
Nice.
You can go through, you load up a save game, and then you choose which boss you want. And you do it for a save game you don't give a shit about, because it is it can mess up your game, obviously. Mm-hmm. But you can do the thing in Dark Souls 1 where you just go back and play whatever fight you like, as opposed to having to wait for ascetics to show up in Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
I think the ones that I like, the one that I actually did on my computer was the Limbo mod one. That one was really cool because the aggressiveness mod, it kind of changes the context of the game because you don't have the same kind of depth perception and you kind of have to go off very few visual cues, which is pretty interesting. I liked it when I tried it, the VR mod for DS3. That was really interesting because it, playing it as a first person experience kind of, obviously it changes the game, but it felt like King's Field again. It was a really interesting experience.
Nice. I don't do mods. So, I thought about today loading up the Thanks Obama mod, but that just was not it just didn't seem worth the time. So.
It's one of those things where if you're going to, you do it to post pictures of almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're going to get enough joy to make that work. Like that's an easy mod to install, but it is. So when I put in the Gravelord mod and stuff, I put in the You Defeated thing at the same time because it's like once I modded, as well. But I wouldn't have just put in the You Defeated thing.
Yeah.
Like that's fun and funny, but it's just not kind of how I roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the final one here, probably most important of all, we have Steve Ritchie who writes in via Patreon saying, I have money riding on this with a friend, so no pressure. Do you eat fish and chips with a fork or a fork and knife or by hand? So utensils with fish and chips or going in barbarian style?
I eat almost everything with a fork and knife. I eat cheeseburgers with a fork and knife, so I definitely eat fish and chips. I can't handle I don't like greasy shit on my hands.
Yeah.
So and fish fish when it gets fried, it gets greasier than fried chicken.
Yeah,
and how that is, but it's somehow oilier. And when I say somehow, it's probably just that
it's an oilier
fish have
meat.
more. Yeah, it's oilier meat. There's some kind of mystery. I don't understand how something can be oilier than the other thing.
Why fire hot?
Yeah, but this fire is hotter than the other one, Cole. That's the point. I don't understand how this object. They're both hot, but how can one be hot and the other one be hotter? But yeah, it's too greasy for me, so I always eat that with a fish fork and knife. But I'm also disqualifying myself because, as I said, I eat cheeseburgers with a fork and knife as well.
So my answer is both. I start out with a fork and knife because they usually bring it out piping hot. And I don't want to wait for too terribly long. It's easier to cut off a small piece, blow on it, get it to a reasonable temperature, and then eat it. But as it cools down, you get impatient and you want to pick it up and eat it with your hands. So yeah, it's both.
What do you think? Tiebreaker.
I like to put it in a blender and blend it up and use it as a topping on other foods.
Ooh.
Possibly inject it in a turducken so you get a turducken fish and chippin situation going on.
A beautiful oblivion.
You get a nice cross section going on.
Yeah.
I probably eat it like a barbarian with my hands.
Yeah.
Because I am a barbarian.
Yeah. But yeah, you get the.
We literally covered the gamut there.
Yeah.
Choose your fighter.
I'm the hybrid class.
Yeah.
I eat with hands.
I want to eat the maniac who is like literally just, all right, my right hand's for the fish blanks, my left hand's, them's for the chips. Bicameral fish and chips legislature.
It does make me want to eat fish and chips, though, the same way that like talking about anything on the podcast kind of dictates what I have for dinner.
Yeah, you guys talk about wings all the time, and I'm like, now I need wings.
Now I gotta have wings. Like you've erased whatever the most recent thing is.
It's after 10 o'clock, so I cannot walk to the bar down the street from me and get their fish and chips. So shit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well.
Yeah, I'm still looking for a superb fish and chips in Portland. Like I've had good fish and chips, but I'm still looking for like, fuck yeah, fish and chips.
Yeah. So
maybe that'll be a good thing to find this week.
Yeah.
And then I'll report back.
Please do.
I will. Thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Mitch.
For your responses. And thank you, Mitch.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had fun too. This was a fun episode, I dare say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where can people find you online?
They can find me at Mitch Benes. That's Benes on Twitter. I haven't tweeted in a literal, 4 or 5 years, but I am going to because I have things sort of coming down the line. You can also find me on the Slack, Tdoggin, Tdoggin. So yeah, I'm a cool guy. I do cool things. None of those are true.
he's dogging. Yeah.
It was a name that somebody came up with for me in high school, and it just kind of stuck because that's the way that you put it in PS3 and that's your name forever. So that's the situation.
No backsies.
My Yahoo address is still a reference to like news radio. Like news radio is good, but it's Phil Hartman talking about somebody's like, you're wearing a Speedo, and he's like wearing a Speedo, that beautiful Speedo freedom, Speedum, and then Speedum is the name of my Yahoo email address, except somebody took it, so it's Speedum X.
I've always read it as Speed OMX. Like as a reference to a song. I can confirm this because that's the address that I send Gary's Patreon money to every month.
Yep. It is an old reference because those things do get calcified.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's probably it. If you like us, if you like the show, you can support us. The show is going away, but the old episodes are staying around, and me and Kole are staying around. You can support our future endeavors at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Yeah. And if you have anything you want to tweet about the show, go ahead and do that. Just at either of us. I am at Kole Ross, KoleRoss.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to tweet me, it's Gary Butt, GaryBuh.
Mm-hmm. And as you're listening, there might still be time to get some general responses in for the final After Dark, which is coming out 2 weeks from when you're listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
I will be excited to be a part of that.
Yeah. It'll. I think it'll be, and I'll be here every week. You're pulling the Brayton. The classic Brayton. Cool. Well, until next time, what should they do, Cole?
They should.
We can't do the same joke as last time. Like
T-dog it. Yeah.
They should T-dog it.
Yeah, they should T-dog it.
Let's T-dog it, bros.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
A T-dog with a fork and knife.
I'd like to blend mine up first.
Can I order mine all balled up?
Yeah. Cool.